Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Lola Giusti, who's here to share with us her new book, Time Pencils. What happens when family stories become a powerful testament to courage, sacrifice, and survival during one of history's darkest moments? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Lola Giusti is a writer and educator whose debut work, Time Pencils, emerged from a profound connection to her family's history and the untold stories of wartime Crete. Her writing is deeply rooted in preserving historical memory and honoring the extraordinary sacrifices of ordinary people. So welcome to the show, Lola Giusti.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I grew up in San Francisco. I had two wonderful grandmothers, one of whom lived with our family in the home. And every day, my brother and I would walk home from school together. And our Greek grandmother, who we called Yaya, met us with something to eat at, the table. And while we were eating, she told us these wonderful stories about how her mother sheltered a downed British airman in her basement. And she told the stories in such a way that it was almost a mini series. And my brother and I would sit there transfixed, and she would give us the next installment and the next installment and kept us going with her special way of weaving in morals and inspirational messages about not giving up and standing up for what you believe in the context of what her family was doing during the Second World War on the island of Crete.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have to say, once I picked up your book, I could not put it down. It is a fascinating read. And so, why don't you share one of the stories because that's just a remarkable story that your grandmother shared with you, but why don't you share one of the stories that really touches your heart?
Well, my great-grandmother had a tremendous amount of courage in sheltering this airman in her basement. It went on and off for 2 years. And during this time in her village of Thrapsano, there were other people involved in what they called the underground or the resistance. And at a certain point, the populace became really disgusted and tired of the Nazi occupation. But they were deeply religious. The Cretan people did not want to retaliate with murder or torture or any of the horrific things that were being forced on them. And with the help of a special operations executive British commando named Patrick Lee Firmer, some of the patriots, including one from Thrapsano Pediados, kidnapped the German general. And it's a fantastic story. I don't want to spoil it, but it was done Cretan style. He was not harmed, although he accidentally broke his arm when he fell from his donkey. The German general was returned to safety in Cairo, and in the 70s met in Athens with the British commando on a television show in Athens. They reunited to tell their story.
Oh my goodness. It is absolutely just fascinating. I think a lot of people don't understand that the Nazis were there during that time and just the real peril that your great grandmother put herself in and the family put themselves in by harboring a British pilot.
Yes, the British military preceded the American military in terms of the unfolding of the Second World War. And reprisals were swift and brutal. Entire families were executed. There were so many people doing what my great grandmother and my great grandfather were doing. What they did was important, but it was by no means unique. There were so many patriotic heroes of this time. Their stories deserve to be told and remembered. You're absolutely right. People know about the French, the British, Polish, all sorts of Second World War stories, but very few people know what happened on the island of Crete. And I wanted to tell the story.
Why do you believe preserving oral tradition is so important, especially in today's world?
Because there are lessons, Marianne. There are lessons to be learned. Imagine enduring 4 years of a brutal occupation and the sort of fortitude, the sort of faith and humility, respect. How do you stand up for what you believe in circumstances like these? Young people might be inspired to read these stories because they haven't been through anything like that. COVID was tough. It was nothing like this.
Not at all. In fact, if anyone's done any research into history, just how devastating that time was for the people who were occupied by the Nazis, it was horrific. That's the only word I can come up with.
Yes, it was.
In your book, Crete itself almost feels like this breathing, living character. What makes the island's history and culture so unique?
Thank you for asking that question. I'm about to get emotional here. The Cretan culture is so special. Crete is an island that sits at a crossroads of Europe, North Africa, um, Asia Minor. The influences over the centuries have been that of Phoenicians, Venetians, Turks, um, people whose cultures swept through the island for sometimes centuries. And it inspired a culture, a civilization of not just resistance, toughness, resourcefulness, resilience, and courage. And this is what I wanted to write about.
Well, I definitely could hear and feel the courage and sacrifice and resilience that was woven within this book. Which of these themes resonates with you the most?
Probably that of not giving up, not giving in. It was so hard at that time to stand out in any way because if you did, you might be executed. It was very hard to do those brave things and worry that reprisals would be exacted upon your family. Um, I didn't want to dwell too much on the brutality of some of the reprisals. So while I wrote about them, I hope I didn't dwell on them to the point where readers would not want to finish the book.
No, actually, you did so well in interweaving all of that with this just profound story. And I'm so glad that you're sharing because it needs to be told. I mean, you must have done some just incredible research for this book. What was that like?
So here behind me is a stack of some of the books I read. And I must say, I'm not a historian. I'm a dentist and teacher. And this subject required a lot of work on my part from bona fide historians and experts. Anthony Beaver, fantastic. G.C. Kyriakopoulos, um, Captain Yanni Prekatsonakis, a captain in the Greek Navy, wrote about the battle for Heraklion. Artemis Cooper, Patrick Lee Fermer himself, the British commando I told you about, wrote a number of books. Evelyn Waugh, a fantastic book by a man named George Psihoundakis, who was a runner at the time, a humble village man with falling apart shoes who ran messages through the Cretan mountains along goat tracks, through sheepfolds, along riverbanks. He wrote this wonderful first person account of what it was like at that time to carry the messages from village to village because the Germans confiscated the radios. They cut off communications from one end of the island to the other. That was part of the way they were able to occupy and dominate the Cretan civilians. And runners like this exceptional man kept communications going, as did people like the wireless operator in my story.
Oh my God, that is just so remarkable. All the stories that you've been able to bring together in this, and just such an important piece of history. How did you balance historical accuracy with storytelling and especially the oral traditions and stories that you've heard from your family?
Well, thank you for asking that because as an academic, I knew how to write nonfiction. I had to publish, I could write about the way a certain procedure was done or do research on a certain philosophy of healthcare. But this required something different. And at a certain point, I could never confirm the identity, the name of the soldier, the airman. He was not a soldier, he was an airman sheltered by my family in Crete. I think I know who he was, but I couldn't be sure because he used a code name to protect himself and the villagers. So at a certain point, what I was going to write as nonfiction, I had to start making up. I made up conversations. I made up where this airman was from in Scotland because it was a fun story. I didn't want to just pitch it and give up. So I wrote it in the genre of historical fiction rather than nonfiction.
Well, I'm so glad that you did because it brings this very dramatic and heartfelt piece to this book that I think a lot of people will really resonate. Many of the characters, and I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but many of your family members and the characters within the book face just such impossible choices during wartime. What do you hope readers take away from these moments?
That even when times are overwhelmingly difficult, there is a human spirit, a spark inside of us that just has to keep putting one foot in front of the other and not give up.
I think that's such an important piece for us to even learn today as we go through many challenges, not even closely related to what was happening during World War II. But I think for a lot of people, hearing not give up and continue is such a profound piece.
I could not agree with you more.
The intergenerational connection between family members is so deeply woven in your story. Why was that important for you to highlight?
Perhaps because our grandmother lived with us, my brother and I benefited so much from my grandmother's presence in the home. Her steady, happy nature. Both of my parents worked. We had a family travel agency, and my grandmother was the person who cared for us when we would get home from school. She would often give us dinner. She couldn't speak English, but she was there while we did our homework. We had to figure out quite a few things by ourselves because of that, but we knew she was there and that she loved us, and we were so lucky. Our other grandmother was also wonderful. She was in the family business, but didn't live with us. So my brother and I were incredibly lucky to have two really wonderful grandmothers in our lives. And I want other people to understand how important these relationships are.
They are most definitely important. I remember my great grandmother, and she was definitely a shining light in my family. So I understand. You really touch on the role of women and how they play. It really is such an important piece in the resistance movement. Why was it important to include their perspectives?
Because so many stories of World War II um, happen to focus on what the men were doing. And of course, the military action, the historical perspective. Often these stories are about and written by men. And the women play a very important role, even though they didn't always write the books or have a chance to tell their stories. They were feeding the families, gathering the snails so that people could eat. There was nothing to eat. I don't know if I was accurate enough in depicting the hunger that the Cretan people had to endure. There was no food. They were gathering wild greens wherever they could find them. The Germans were requisitioning as much of the food sources of the island as possible to feed their own troops. And the women kept their own families and the villages and the Allied soldiers fed. One of my friends has a mother who, as a young girl, snuck out and fed Anzac soldiers in the area of her village. And these New Zealanders honored her after the war. And so many courageous women are nameless. Their contributions are not recognized in books or movies. Um, it's it's a lot what they contributed. My great grandmother had an important role. She was by no means unique. There were so many women in the villages operating quietly, keeping their families together, especially when their husbands were killed or disappeared.
Yeah, I think having that understanding, and I've seen actually a documentary a while back about how the people of Crete and in Greece as well were the women became so creative in what they can find as food sources. So it was the women that actually kept the people alive during that time.
Yes. And men who could go into the mountains and hunt or bring home something, of course they would. But many times the men had to flee the villages and hide in the mountains, or they were serving on the mainland of Greece in the military and were far from home. So, yes, it fell to the women to keep everybody going and clothed. These children would grow and outgrow their clothing, and women had to get creative in lengthening skirts, pants, making shirts work for their growing children who were so skinny and just hanging in there.
Why did you decide on calling the book Time Pencils?
Well, one of the episodes in the book involves the sabotage of an airfield. And I did a lot of reading. I'm not an expert on military weaponry, but I learned about a type of detonator that looks like a number two pencil, a writing implement. And the British Secret Intelligence Services developed this time pencil that could be programmed to go off at a certain time interval, 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, by crimping this pencil with a boot or a pliers. A glass vial inside the pencil would shatter and a chemical reaction would begin. And if this detonator were inserted into an explosive like thermite, it would become a bomb. And it was very handy to have these detonators at these sabotage operations. But I also liked the metaphor of a pencil that records an era, a time. So there's a direct definition of a time pencil for you, but I'd like to extend it to the metaphor of something that recorded what was happening in a village during the Second World War in Crete.
Oh my goodness. What a just a powerful piece of information and story and how you bring this all together. Did you travel to Crete? Have you gone back and maybe visited some of the places, or you probably still have family there, right?
I did indeed. I went for the first time with my grandmother when I was 13. They did not have running water in the home where we were staying. Um, it was wonderfully hospitable. This is the village where they make the beautiful pottery that's used all over the island. Pottery that can be used as cisterns to gather rainwater, to hold olive oil or grain. And when not in wartime, a lot of people use them for flowers and small trees in their gardens. And it's a wonderful village. It's fallen into not disrepair, but it's not the thriving village that it once was. I hope it has a comeback. It's a wonderful place with wonderful people.
It sounds like a very magical place to be a part of. My goodness.
The artisans are incredible. What they do with the clay soil in creating these pots, or pitharia as they're known, is truly magical. And I think there's a bit of the divine involved in taking clay and creating pottery using fire.
That is something quite remarkable and something I've never been able to do. We'll put it that way.
And I haven't either.
Well, I love how your novel captures both this tenderness and the tension within the family, especially during this wartime. How important was it for you to show those quieter human moments alongside conflict?
Well, thank you for asking, because I had a very specific purpose in mind here. So many of the wartime stories that are told involve a really courageous man and a sweet woman. And I thought that some of the best stories coming out of Crete at that time involved a really courageous woman and sweet men. These men are loving and prize their families, prize their village connections. And I hope I showed some of their tenderness as well as their courage.
You most definitely did. It was so beautifully written. What would you like readers and our listeners to really kind of carry through their day about the people of Crete and the spirit of resistance and their spirit of resilience?
Well, I hope to uplift readers. I don't want this book to make people sad and upset and extremely downbeat. I hope to instill in readers some of the uplifting moral stories that my grandmother gave to my brother and me about staying true to who you are and how you go about standing up for yourself and how important it is to do that within your values.
Well, and you have such beautiful photos at the end that people can really connect with. Such a great book. Oh my goodness, Lola. Where can people connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Oh my. I have a website, www.timepencils.com. I'm active on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and would love to hear from readers, especially if they enjoyed the book.
Lola, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for your interest, Marianne, and for your support.
Well, thank you, Lola. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Time Pencils. Make sure to visit her website at timepencils.com to be part of her community and learn more about her book. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.